Nobody normally gets killed around here. They're mostly detached houses, and you never even hear shouting. So it took me a minute to tipple to what she was saying. I said, "Dead? Is it a heart attack?" She said, "Oh no, nothing like that. Just look at me. I'm in my bare feet." I really only know her to nod to. But they have a lovely magnolia. And once, when she was in the garden, I called out, "You've had more luck with your Magnolia grandiflora than I have." But she just smiled and said, "Yes." And since I didn't have another remark up my sleeve ready, that was the end of that. I do that all the time. Start a conversation and can't keep it going. Blondish woman. A bit washed out looking. Nice, tired sort of face. Anyway, she comes out into the road and waits for me to get to their gate, says, "I know I don't really know you, only there's something wrong with Mr. McCorkerdale." I was actually rushing, because I'd planned on getting the 5 to 9 and going into Sainsbury's, but anyway, I went in. I said, "Has he been poorly?" She said, "No. I've a feeling he's dead. Come through. Only, Mrs. Horrocks, he doesn't have any trousers on." I said, "Well, I do my stint at the hospice twice a week. That's not a problem. Only, to be fair, I just take the trolley round. I've never actually been there when anyone's been going, and they think I'm not really ready to administer the consolation yet." She had a nice linen dress on. Very simple. I think she might have been drinking. He was lying on his back on the rug, one of those fleecy, hairy things with blood and whatnot coming from somewhere behind his head. And it's awful, because the first thing I thought was, well, she won't get that out. He had on some green Y-fronty things, which I would have thought were a bit young for someone who's retired, but Henry's just the same. Suddenly takes his head to go in for something a bit more dashing. Little terraline socks. I said, "Should I touch him?" She said, "You can if you want, but he is dead. I've been sitting here looking at him for an hour." I said, "His pants are on back to front." She said, "Oh, that's me. I thought I'd better put them on before I fetch somebody in." He had a little tattoo, not far from his belly button. And I remember when they moved in, Henry said he thought he had something to do with vending machines. I said, "Did he bang his head, do you think?" She said, "Oh, no. I shot him. I've put the gun away." And she opens the sideboard drawer, and there it is, with the playing cards and the table mats. He had a gun because he'd been in Malaya, apparently. Well, my first thought was to ring Henry and ask what to do, but I couldn't face the fuss. I was still a bit nervous of calling 999 because I'm never quite sure what constitutes an emergency. Anyway, I thought, well, if she'd waited an hour already, I might as well make her a cup of tea first. And as I was running the tap, I called out, "The police haven't been here already, have they?" And she said, "No, why?" And I said, "Nothing." only there were a pair of handcuffs on the draining board. The policeman had some difficulty writing. Big boy. Nice ears. Spelling all over the place. When I asked him what he thought had happened, he said, "Well, it's marriage, isn't it? The stresses and strains of. Though we don't normally expect it with oldish people. They've generally got it out of their system by then. And it's a bit early in the day. People seem to like to get breakfast out of the way before the shooting starts." I was just signing my statement when Henry arrives back and, of course, prolongs the process. "I don't know that Mrs. Horrocks quite means this, officer. What you said to me on the phone, young lady, was..." I said, "Henry, you weren't there." Policeman winks and says, "Now then, we don't want another shooting match, do we? I mean, at first, Henry didn't even know who they were." "Not the Chow." I said, "No, that's the Broadbents." Anyway, he sits about for a bit, whistling under his breath, and then goes upstairs and attacks his computer. When the policeman had gone, I went up and apologised, and asked Henry whether he thought anything had been going on. He said, "Why?" I said, "Well, she didn't have anything on under that linen dress." Of course, any suggestion of that just embarrasses Henry. He's such an innocent. He said, "Rosemary, I don't know what sort of world you think you're living in, but I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. In the meantime, let's just remember that somebody has died. I'm only sorry that you had to be the one that was passing, because I'd have preferred you not to be involved." I went out later to get some milk from the garage, and there were still 1 or 2 reporters outside number 17. And a whole branch of the magnolia broken off. One of them said, "Are you a neighbour? Did you know the McCorkerdales?" I just shook my head and didn't say anything. So one of them shouts after me, "You owe it to the community." So I turned round and I said, "Yes, and you owe it to the community not to break branches off people's magnolia trees." And it was just at that point when the photographer takes a picture. And it's in the paper this morning with me looking like a mad woman. And the caption, "The real face of suburbia." Whereas the real face of suburbia was Henry's when he saw it. I woke up in the night and could hear him whistling. I said, "Are you thinking about Mrs. McCorkerdale?" He said, "No, I was thinking about the house. Prices are down as it is, and something like this isn't going to help matters." And he reached over from his bed and took my hand. "You must try not to be upset. But unless we get at least 175, we'll have to kiss goodbye to Marbella." I keep wondering if I ought to have told somebody about the handcuffs.